Did you know something new is invented every 10 minutes? Join us as we speak to the innovators reinventing our world here on planet Earth and far, far beyond. Welcome to GTWN Now, a podcast brought to you by the Global Telecom Women's Network and sponsored by CMS Global. GTWN Now introduces the movers and the makers at the cutting edge of technology who are committed to keeping us all connected. In each episode, we invite a leading expert to share her experience building life-changing inventions in places and spaces that don't yet exist, and the inspiration they must muster to tackle the impossible. We also ask our guests to share tips, tools, and strategies to reach your own moonshot. I'm your host, Rosalia Gitau, founder of Bixi FinTech for Women and Global Telecom Women's Network International Board Member. Welcome to GTWN Now.
It is such a pleasure to have a very special guest today, and for me to be the moderator of GTWN Now podcast. So I am Candace Johnson, the founding president of GTWN, and today we're actually turning tables, and we are going to be interviewing Rosalia Gitau on her amazing life and what she is doing. You know, so many times you have gotten to know her as being the host of our podcast, but today we wanted to focus in on this amazing young woman. So Rosalia, and I have to say the first time that I met Rosalia, she had been the winner of 1 Million Entrepreneurs. And I was so impressed with her. I said, wow, I have to get to know this woman better. And this was about, 8 years ago. And so we are just so thrilled that she is now a member of the GTWN International Board, our Secretary General, and the host of our GTWN Now. But for you to know a little bit behind what she is doing, she is a fintech executive attorney. She is an author and a humanitarian. She's the co-founder and CEO of Bixi, an award-winning financial technology company for women, recognized as a top fintech company by the Manila Times, the Financial Alliance for Women, and Women's World Banking. How's that? She has over 15 years of international law, diplomacy, and finance in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas with the United Nations, Alibaba, Sherman, and Sterling, as well as the governments of the USA, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. She's the author of Hotspots, so a novel, for which she won a PEN Award nominee. And she's also the co-founder of the Humanitarian Women's Network, the largest global network of women in international affairs. And I think this is very pertinent for our, digital humanism series that is currently running on GTWN Now podcast. She is also a visiting fellow at Zinc Venture Capital, a United Nations University and Brookings Institution scholar, and sits on the boards of the HWN and, of course, of the GTWN, the Global Telecom Women's Network. She holds a BA from UCLA, an MSc from the London School of Economics, and a JD from New York University. I mean, this woman has it all. In addition to all of this, she is a world record holding mountaineer and runner living in Thailand and with her husband and 3 daughters. She hails from the Philippines and Kenya by way of California. Talk about a global, player in our fantastic ecosystem. So, Rosalia, welcome to the show. I'm sure you must be feeling very strange having me interview you. But let's just jump right in. And can you tell us about Big C and your mission? Because that is indeed how I first got to meet you when you won the 1 Million Entrepreneurs Award. So just tell us about it.
So thank you so much. It is very strange being on the other side of the interview microphone. I actually didn't anticipate how strange it was going to be. I'm so used to prying into other people's business and then also sharing how fantastic they are. And it is very strange to be in this position, but it was many thanks to, of course, it was Candace's idea that I sit on the other side of the fence. And I'm very grateful to, because I'm very excited to speak about an amazing project that my company Bixie has recently undertaken. So this is a fantastic opportunity to let everybody know about all of the possibilities that lie in financial digital inclusion. So a bit about Bixie. Bixie is a financial literacy and digital investments platform. It's the learning and the doing, right? The essence of practice. What we do is our mission is to empower women to know our worth and to grow our worth. And what that actually means concretely is we want everybody to become financially literate. We want it to be a fun and enjoyable experience. And once empowered with this knowledge, we also want people to have access to a marketplace of financial products that is tailored to their needs. And all of this sounds pretty obvious. We think they all exist. The interesting thing is over 99% of women globally, regardless of socioeconomic status, education, they just don't take an active role in investing in their lives. And rather unfortunately, with all the time that I spent at the United Nations, I see how detrimental that can be to us as women and to our families, and the attendant adverse impacts that have on the rest of our communities. So I really wanted, when I was working at the UN, this is not a huge logical leap to somehow end up in financial technology. It was very much part of a long process where we were pouring in so much money into pretty devastating situations, but yet not doing that next step, which is empowering people to know, well, what do I do once I have this initial capital? What can I do to make sure that this devastation doesn't happen to me and my family again? And that's the role we want to play. And we actually want to work not only with, the banks and the investment firms that have these financial products, but with the aid agencies to say, hey, we can help you with that next step, so that with that initial capital injection, we say, okay, now this is what you need to do to take that capital and make it more capital. Because as I discovered in my journey from the UN to Bixie, that's what the system of capitalism is all about. Taking capital and turning it into more capital and making that accessible to more people. So that's what we try to do at Bixie. And I think today, we really want to flag specifically a project that we are going to be doing in the Philippines in 2025. And this project is called Project Dream. This is an acronym that stands for Disaster Resilience Enhanced Anticipatory Action with Microinsurance. It sounds like a lot of words. For those of you who are not familiar with the humanitarian aid sector background, there is, like all industries, we have our own set of, technical language, i.e. jargon. And this project really hits on all of the most important things, especially with everything currently going on in the world. The things that are really being prioritized, the only things that are being prioritized amidst all the cuts in the aid sector. And I want to break down what it means. Resilience, anticipatory action. What do they actually mean, these words? Resilience, there's two ways to think about resilience. There's a cynical way and there's the optimistic way. I'll start with the optimism. Optimism, we all want to be resilient. We hear about this everywhere, from books by Angela Duckworth about raising children with grit being the most important predictor for success, to all the way through the aid sector, where it can mean more helping people to get on their own feet. That's the positive, interpretation of it. Some pessimistic interpretations include, look, this can't go on forever. And perhaps it can't. Aid, as we're seeing globally, the budgets are being cut because it's becoming increasingly difficult to justify foreign expenditures when people in their home countries are experiencing so many challenges post-COVID. And we see that everywhere, from the US to Europe to Australia. It's everywhere. So the kind of wave is moving in the direction of, we've really got to help people stand on their own 2 feet, because we just can't keep sharing our GDP with the rest of the world, right? And so that's what resilience can mean. Anticipatory action is a new technical term, new-ish technical term used in the aid industry to mean doing. So one of the things about aid, so I was in all of the big disasters, from the Haiti earthquake to Ebola. And one of the challenges with disaster response is it's in the name. We're always responding. We're not anticipating that a lot of these things are going to happen, especially anything climate related. We already know that certain parts of the world are more prone to floods. We already know all of these things. So why not put in place systems so that people like me don't have to be called in the middle of the night to fly over the world with a backpack, and help when that costs a lot more money. So that, the going figures are, for every dollar spent on anticipatory action, you save $7 to $14 in disaster response, right? And also the attendant life-saving and help that you don't need to have when things already go wrong. So let's try and prevent things from going wrong. So that's what the anticipatory action part is. And Project Dream is really about looking at, how do we strengthen communities, create systems in place that prevent them from falling and collapsing in the event of a disaster that we know is going to happen. And the microinsurance part is because we believe that microinsurance, which is part of the wider gamut of microinvestments, is a really sustainable and positive way that we can do this. If we know that island states like the Philippines, which we do, experience upwards of 7,000 climate-related disasters every single year, there should be put in place microinsurance protections that cover housing, health, property, business, and this is the thing that I found interesting after I left the UN. I worked at Alibaba, Alipay specifically, and there's so many insurance products, there's so many investment products, $2, $3. And I kept thinking, why didn't I know about any of this when I was working on the other side? Because instead of natural disaster hits, house collapses, businesses ruined, come to an aid agency, they can just go like the rest of us to our insurer when something bad happens, get even more money than they would have from an aid agency, and rebuild their lives in a truly dignified manner. And that's what we're trying to do with Project Dream. We've done this in the past in the Philippines through a very similar project called Rise. It wasn't just microinsurance, it was also business grants that we pushed through our mobile application. So female entrepreneurs who were in disaster risk areas, particularly flood prone, they were given grants for their business by playing, financial literacy games on our app. And then we topped that up with business insurance. So they never had to become part of the humanitarian caseload again. And we had tremendous impact. We showed digital inclusion, financial inclusion, obviously increased financial literacy over time, 3 to 6 months after the project ended. So once we were able to really show that our novel way of working with populations actually brought impactful results, now we're able to scale that up with a much bigger player in the Philippines. And our ambition is that we'll be able to scale this program up all over the world to at least 100 countries where over $4 billion is currently spent in humanitarian aid, just cash transfer alone. There really is no reason why millions of people shouldn't have access to microinsurance and microinvestment products through a mobile application, because this is absolutely available and it's much cheaper and much more dignified than current solutions that are on the table.
So it sounds great. I have a couple of remarks and a couple of questions. So first of all, it is very interesting that you have identified the financial literacy. 35 years ago, when I was working at a German telecoms manufacturing company, there were 8,000 employees. I was the only woman in management, and about 7,800 were women who were working on the factory street. And I said, wow, got to do something about this. And so I started a project called Fuba Frauen. The name of the company was Fuba, and Frauen is women. And the first thing that I did was to get, financial experts to come and to talk about how these women should take care of their finances. And the second thing that I did was to bring in our techies and to explain to them what the products that they were at that time, working on these factory streets, what they served, how come they were so important, to really give, as you say, dignity. And one of the happiest things I was happy about was that the project went on after I left, and they started giving diplomas and everything. So, our slogan, the GTWN slogan, is the changing culture of communications from generation to generation. So I'm very happy to
Apt.
see. Yeah, I'm very happy to see that this is happening. Now, Rosalia, this, you can't do this alone. And so you've talked about the United Nations, you've talked about the Philippines, helping you. But what about the company? So, do you have like insurance partners?
Yeah. So this is so the you're so right. Any project of this undertaking where you want to provide finances, technology to at-risk communities in hard to reach areas, any one of those is a difficult issue to tackle. Moreover, entities that do support any one of these tend to operate in silos. So like anything, you have a lot of experience in this, bridging all of those gaps is honestly the hardest part. And I think that's where, that was my greatest lesson, that, the technology is there, obvious. The financial products are there, obvious. One of our partners is AXA, the world's leading insurer, right? Like everything is there. How to link them. And it's not the products themselves. Again, easy. Put a micro insurance on an application. We see that all the time with travel insurance when we buy our plane ticket. It's finding the right people at each entity, convincing them in their own words that this is going to work for whatever their respective objective is, and that they are going to get along with the other people. And that's frankly, that's the last part that's the hardest, because like you say, the culture of communications, the cultural aspect of an aid worker and a person in finance is very different. But frankly, the personality types are very the same. So that's been the hardest part. I absolutely have partners. So finance, I have my banking partners, such as Union Bank, my insurance partners, such as AXA. On the aid side, I have my United Nations partners, and I have international NGOs that we've worked with, such as Catholic Relief Services, right? In the kind of reaching, and that's the reaching the hardest communities. Obviously, there has to be local buy-in. So we always work with our local government and national government counterparts. And then, of course, the communities themselves, the women themselves, bringing all, and then, so here's a fun part, the hard to reach areas. We got to throw in another fun entity into this mix, satellite communicators, right? So as you're trying to solve problems, you find more problems, as we all know. And I've lived in the Philippines for many years. Anybody who has knows that connectivity is still an issue. We have thousands of islands, but even on the main island of Luzon, there's still issues. So if I want our project to be accessible to everyone that is at risk and in need, I had to suddenly find reliable internet service, where again, I was able to luckily to leverage on the, connections of GTWN Candace in particular. And so, we're looking to work with a satellite provider called Pacific, the Pacific's largest satellite provider, to provide exactly that tie-in, because we have a lot of mission alignment. But again, this is going to be, I can't wait for the first kickoff meeting, where where some of this arguably people who've never thought they'd ever meet are all sitting around a table figuring out a project together. But again, sorry, go please.
Yeah, no, it's going to be wonderful. And actually, here again,
Yeah.
anticipating.
Yeah.
So it was really 12 years ago that a group of GTWN members got together with women from the Pacific, from New Zealand, from
Yes.
the
Yes. Yes.
Philippines, from Australia, from the Cook Islands, from Samoa, etc. And we put together what we called ONSAT, Oceania Women's Network.
Yes. Yes.
And, also here again, just kind of putting, theory into practice. So we said we need to do something to make certain that these Pacific islands have connectivity. And so we got together, we put an RFP out for satellite connectivity. We found an absolutely wonderful entrepreneur. He wasn't a woman. He was a man, but that was okay. And so we then invested in Pacific. So, and if some of us didn't have the money, then others would put in the money to buy the shares for those people who didn't have the money to buy the shares, so that everybody could have the experience of investing. And so we were one of the first investors, and we're so delighted that we're helping schools, villages, hospitals, governments throughout the Pacific, and now we will be working, with you. So we're very, very excited about this. Um, so, Rosalia, you've talked about how bringing all of these people, together is hard. And you also talk about your professional experience. I would like to know, in all of the studies and experiences that you have had, what is the one characteristic or, about you, what that has allowed you to come so far with this project and with this mission? What drives you, and what allows you to make all of this happen?
I think your answer will be the same as mine. I think the answer of any dreamer who sees their dream come to life is dogged persistence. Like you just can't give up. You just can't give up, and you just don't give up. And this was a real lesson. This was a real lesson to myself during this process. Like most of my life, I'm a very persistent person. If I may regress to one of the first times that I really kind of shocked myself and others with my level of persistence, I was at UCLA. It was my first year, and everybody said, you need to get an internship, right? So I was like, well, I need to get an internship. So I really wanted to work in a low income area in the city of Watts, which is infamously low income, predominantly Black American in the US. And I, looked up, this is before Google, so this is not easy to do, but I somehow found who is going to be the council person, congressperson, and I'm going to figure out a way to work in their office. And I'm going to work in their satellite office in Watts. And so I find the name of the chief of staff for who is, and I literally called, I sent my CV. Again, this is pre-internet. So paper to City Hall in Los Angeles to who is now the chief of staff for Janice Hahn, Congresswoman Janice Hahn. You might know her. She comes from a large, political family in California. And I called every day. It became this like I don't know. I mean, it became this like obsession every day at 1 o'clock. And I know it was on because I would go to class and I'd have my lunch and I had the flip phone Motorola and I said, hi, it's me again, just following up. And they're like, yeah, he'll take a look at it when he can. Every day for 6 months. There wasn't a single day that they did not hear from me. And then finally, literally at 6 months, the reception said, okay, the chief of staff has booked an appointment for you. Be here at this and this time. It's like, no problem. I show up and I walk into his office and I sit down. He says, "My, you're persistent." That's it. That was and he already, like, all of us knew I was being hired. This was not an interview. This was really just a screening to see if I was insane or persistent. And so he decided I looked okay, so I must just be very persistent. So that was a really important lesson that I learned at 18, that like if you just keep going and nobody but you're not crazy, right? Eventually you kind of wear people down. This has happened at Bixie. So the Bixie journey, very standard startup. I raised my friends and family round. I raised my angel round. We signed with a VC in Hong Kong. We're just about to get our $1 million ticket when the invasion of Ukraine happened, or what the political geopolitics changed, and overnight our offer was rescinded. And at the time we had some competitors also in financial literacy, basically Alipay for women. And I was like, what are we gonna do? I had 30 people, and payroll still needs to get paid, and I really was like, what are we gonna do? And we just had to sit around and brainstorm. How are we just gonna bring in cash? It doesn't matter. Don't feel don't be overcommitted. Just how are we gonna bring in cash so we can actually finish the application? That's what we needed to do. And so we just had to adapt and persist and adapt and persist. And let me tell you, 2 years now, our competitors all closed shop because they all took, like, there's nobody left. And I'm pretty sure, yes, our product is great and we're great and everything's great. I think we just are the last people standing. So sometimes just dogged persistence coupled with, I was going to cheat. And when you ask, like, what's your number one trait? Persistence, but also high adaptability. I've always been a very adaptable person. I know a situation and I adapt really quickly. And we literally just outlasted our competitors. There's nothing else that happened.
So I'm going to add one thing to this, and it's so funny. I do have to share this with you and also with our audience. So now I'm going to go back. Oh my goodness gracious. I will go back almost 50 years. I was 26. And I had the idea. I was the marketing executive for a radio syndicate in the United States, and I had the idea for the Steinway Hour.
Oh.
And when you come to my home, you will see in the kitchen the poster for the Steinway Hour, and I saw, and I think one thing is also, identifying the person who can help you.
Yes.
So
yes.
I spend much time figuring out, just as you did,
Yeah.
who is the person that I can go to. So I decided it was Mr. Steinway. And so he was in Washington, D.C., and I crashed a party where I knew he was going to be. He didn't know that I had crashed the party. So he thought I was just a normal, guest. And I go up to him and I say, Mr. Steinway, I have an idea for the Steinway Hour. And he said, okay, send it to me. I said, I will. So put my idea down, sent it to him. And indeed, for the next 6 months, I called every day. Now, you were smart. Well, so the problem here, there wasn't internet, but there were secretaries. And so the secretaries, kept on saying, well, he's not here. He's in a meeting. He is busy. And so finally, at one day, I said, if I call at 7:30 in the morning, the secretary won't be there, but maybe he will, which was indeed the case. And so he said, Miss Johnson, did you believe me when I said that, when the secretary said that I was in a meeting, not there, on a phone call? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, we'll do the Steinway hour with you. Now, now you see though, Rosalia, I don't call it dogged persistence or stubbornness. I call it believing.
Mm.
The idea that he did not want to speak with me never entered my head. I did believe the secretary.
Mm.
And, you have to believe in what you are doing.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and then of course that will lead to high adaptability,
Yeah.
etc. So, but just say, I believe. And that's why we have this, phrase, true believers. Are you a true believer? If you are a true believer, you're going to get the thing done.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely wonderful, and I think it is great. I would also like to, if you don't mind, because this question of insurance is actually very much related, I believe, to your own life.
Yes.
And would you share the gift that your mother gave you? Because I
Yeah.
think it was incredible. Yeah.
So my mother migrated from the Philippines to the US, as did my father from Kenya to the US. They both met in Washington, D.C. They were part of the highly skilled immigrants program back when, migration was much more free flowing than arguably it
Allowed,
is today.
allowed,
Um,
allowed,
so
allowed.
they were both studying, they were both at university in the US. And um, my mother had my older sister. And then 4 years later, she had me. And then she was pregnant with my little sister, and was diagnosed with cervical cancer. Um, and it was basically terminal. And so she had my sister, went to treatment, um, and unfortunately, she died at the age of 36. And it was, that life event very much sent my family, my entire life and family, into an absolute tailspin. My dad 100% could not deal with what was happening. All of our family was on different continents. It really just, that was the defining moment. And I have no idea why she did this, but prior to even getting sick, she took out life insurance policy. And it covered my sisters and myself. And it was thanks to this foresight that honestly at 36 I didn't have, that I was then able to, it wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough for me to kickstart my own life. Like I was able to go to university without any familial support. And then with that, foot on the rung, just work really hard to just get a lot of scholarships after that. But that's the power of life insurance. Like, yes, something very bad happened. A disaster struck our family. We spiraled. The spiral literally was all around the world. I was ping-ponged between California, Kenya, and the Philippines. But because she was insured, I was able to really have a future that was sustainable over time. And I think what's really interesting, you talk a lot about, I watched your TED Talk, around the time before we met, because you were one of the judges. So I was obviously doing my spying on all the judges. And I remember you say something along the lines of like, space was your destiny. Like you just, something like you said, true belief. Like, well, it's not a belief. It's a fait accompli. Like this is happening. And I so believe that what we're doing at Bixie is a fait accompli. Whether it's going to be me who does it, or I'm the classic first company, and then the people who come next to me are the ones who make it, a big thing, but I know that providing financial literacy tied to cheap and affordable products for women is like, it's such an obvious thing that someone is going to do it. And when we recently were, doing this project with UN, they decided, of all the places to kickstart the project in the entire island of the Philippines, they were going to do it in Cagayan, which happens to be exactly where my family is from. And there is something, and I knew the second they said this is our pilot site and everybody had to like submit their procurement documents and their expressions of interest, I knew it was us. I knew. I was like, yes, this is my hometown. I know. And I was like, it's done. And I think that I don't know if we have this like preordained destiny, or if just through dogged pursuit we kind of figure it out along the way. Tangentially, I have identical twin daughters. They are genetically identical. They are raised in the same house. Everything is the same. They couldn't be more different as human beings. They have literally made me believe, I'm not a religious person, but I now believe that there is something, a soul, whatever you want, but there is something other than our physical and our environment. We have something. They couldn't be more different. And I do think like that thing, the words that we use, destiny, soul, God, whatever it is, the inexplicable, sixth, seventh sense, I think it exists. And I think our job on this planet is we're born and we're supposed to navigate ourselves towards it. It's kind of like sea turtles. They're born, they're hatched on the beach, but they're just like, they know they have to get to the sea. And you just have to follow that curiosity. I think when we first met and in the course of our working together, I recently, and this is the strange, again, last year I reached out to you and I said, I have this interest in space and I can't really articulate what it is. Do you remember this? I can't really articulate what it is, but I've always followed my curiosity and I'm following it. And if, you could connect me to some people and I can just keep following that curiosity. And I have, and it turns out it was a really critical component to the project moving forward. So I think, again, I don't know if it's called destiny. I don't know if I'm just a sea turtle hatchling that needs to find my way to the sea, but following that curiosity, it almost feels instinctual. And I think that will lead you to the thing maybe that you're supposed to be doing.
So listen, this is absolutely great. You do make your own luck. You do follow your destiny. And we are now coming to the close of our podcast, which I think we should have done it much earlier. We should probably schedule 2 or 3, but and we will for sure do that in other series of our podcasts. So I think just before I kind of close, is there one message, I kind of have said it, but is there one takeaway that you would like to give to young women who are, building their companies for positive impact?
Yeah, I think I would probably recap it as, persist, but really persist and really understand what the fine line between like a stalker and somebody who's really persistent is. That's kind of, key. I think you have to adapt, and I think you have to follow your curiosity and the how to get to that point. Because everyone's always like, oh, but yeah, sure, I want to persist, I want to adapt, I want to stay curious, but what's the actual tool to get there? And I always just say true silence. I meditate every day, and that's how I make decisions. Just, I need a clear mind. And
yes,
you just need that clarity. And then it's almost like the sea will call you. You'll figure out what the next right move is towards your destiny. So yeah, persist, adapt, and stay curious and follow your curiosity.
Yeah. Well, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much Rosalia, for sharing your experiences, your vision, your accomplishment of the vision. And, we are also including in the show notes a number of, links and videos that will be very interesting for our listeners and our viewers. And please don't forget, a new episode of GTWN Now comes out every Tuesday on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And we would love for you to, listen and watch and like and comment and subscribe. And thank you so much for joining us on another episode of GTWN Now, dear Rosalia.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much, Candace. I want to thank our guest for joining today's episode of GTWN Now, and give a big thank you to our sponsors, CMS Global, for making this episode possible. Today's podcast will be available on our website, gtwn.org, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when new episodes drop. I'm your host, Rosalia Gitau, GTWN International Board Member, wishing you a week of wonder.